6 months ago, at the start of 2024, I downloaded the game engine GDevelop and set out to learn how to make games in my spare time. And today, I'm going to go through each project I've done over the first half year as a beginner game dev. Along the way, I'll discuss some of the challenges I've faced, as well as some of the things I've learned from each project. Like I said in the intro, the engine I decided to go with is GDevelop. I picked this engine because of its interesting visual scripting language that allows you to program logic for your game without first learning a normal programming language. It's really neat, and it's allowed me to break out of tutorial hell and get started making my own games. And when you're doing everything by yourself, it's good to find ways to make things easier for yourself. Of course, there are downsides to visual scripting. It definitely takes longer to achieve the same outcome as it would take for a regular programming language. And once your project gets big enough, it can be kind of a hassle to keep things organized and actually understand what is going on in your game. But you can take the concepts you learn from visual scripting and apply them to another, more proper programming language later down the road if I wanted to pick up, say, Godot or something like that. So this is what I'm sticking with for now. For the first game I made, I wanted to start off small and manageable. Too often I'd seen people jump into game dev and want to make some massive dream game as their first project, only to get discouraged and eventually quit altogether after they hit roadblock after roadblock. So my idea was to start small and learn a couple of things with each project, so that eventually I will be able to make that dream project someday in the future, armed with the collected knowledge I'd gained making smaller projects. So I decided a simple wave-based top-down shooter would be a decent place to start. It's nothing fancy, you just dodge the enemies while trying to get ammo pickups, but it allowed me to get to grips with the basics of the event sheet system and the fundamentals of how GDevelop works. Game 2, or as I called it, Zomburbia, is a very basic top-down zombie shooter. The project objectives of Zomburbia were to make basic enemy AI that was a bit more advanced than just walking in a straight line towards the player, and to make multiple weapons that you can switch between. It's more of a demo than a game, really, as there's no real goal or lose condition, but it served its purpose as a learning project well enough. Things I learned from this project were the basics of state machines for enemy AI and familiarization with GDevelop's debugging system. There's still a pretty bad bug where if you get too close to a wall, the center point of the player sprite, which is what the enemies use as a target point for their pathfinding, will become unreachable by the AI, causing a massive lag spike as the game tries to find a way to pathfind over and over every frame for each instance of the enemy. It's pretty bad, but it served its purpose well enough, so I'd call it a success. One Way Through is a short top-down tank game. The goals of this project were to make an actual finished game from start to finish, however small it might end up being, complete with objectives to complete and a failure state if your health reaches 0. It's simple like the others, but I actually find myself loading this project up once in a while to this day. The main things I've learned from this project is simpler is often better in game design. I spent tons of time making it so the enemy rocket troops eventually run out of ammo and have to walk over to the closest tent to resupply with more rockets before they can fire at you again. This adds literally nothing to the game, and a much simpler timer-based system or something like that would have worked just as well, been easier to implement, and made it so the game was finished sooner. But I'm pretty happy with how the game turned out, and I've thought about making a more advanced version of this same concept in the future, but we'll see if I revisit it or not. Game 4, Tower Castle Adventure Guy vs. the Wizard, is the first project that I spent more than a couple of days on. In fact, this project took a little over a month to complete. It's a side-scroller, platformer, Metroidvania thing, and I think I sort of bit off more than I could chew with this one, and I was at the very limits of what my knowledge could accomplish at the time. I made many, many mistakes while making this game, and made things way, way harder for myself than they needed to be. I hadn't yet learned how tile sets worked, so everything in this game is manually placed on a grid as an individual object, or an instance of an object, I guess, which contributed to the long dev time considerably. All the text in the game is rendered as an individual sprite, and the whole thing is pretty buggy. But I still kind of find myself charmed by this project as I look back on it. Knowing what I know now, I would do almost everything completely differently, so this game is kind of like a time capsule of my early development, like troubles. It has an interesting sense of humor that I guess I was using as a crutch to keep players interested as they play. It's also super unfair. Spikes are insta-death, there's no checkpoint system at all, so each death you have to completely restart the game. At one point, I even have an NPC character encourage you to try to jump over a gap that's impossible, it's too big. There's also a part where you have to blow a hole in the wall with a bomb you find, and I made it so it looks like the bomb fuse went out, and kind of daring the player to go check on it, only for it to explode a few seconds later, which insta-kills the player if they got too curious and approached the bomb. The game is downright hostile to the player, and I love it for that for some reason. It also has a pretty comedic ending, which I will now spoil for you, or at least the bad ending. Game number 5, The Avalon Incident, is my favorite game that I've made so far, and the only one I would actually recommend you try out. You play as an FBI special agent that is sent to go investigate a strange island that is infested with killer robots. You walk around the island examining different items and piece together the story of what happened here and how the island got this way. It's got weapons you can find, ammo and health pickups, and a couple different enemies, including a kamikaze drone that'll really mess you up if you're not careful. It's still amateurish and buggy, but this is the first thing I've made that actually sort of feels like a game, and for the moment at least, I'm kind of proud of it. Took around 3 months to complete, and I learned a ton while making it. Specifically, the system that handles transitions between scenes is something that I'm sure I'll use in many games to come. And this is also the first game of mine to actually have a game design document made beforehand, which I would highly recommend and will continue to use going forward. I've deliberately left all video of this game spoiler-free in case anyone wants to try it out for themselves. The links for all these games can be found in the description, by the way, so check that out when the video is over. Game number 6 is another unfinished demo more than a game. For this project, I was setting out to learn the program Tiled and how to make tile sets and how to work with tile sets, as well as how to create a scalable text system for NPC dialogue that scrolls text in one letter at a time, as previously I only knew how to load entire strings of text all at once. Because the learning objectives for this demo were very narrow, I ended up just abandoning the project once I'd figured out how to do the stuff I wanted. A bit of an anticlimactic end, but I think knowing when to abandon a project is, instead of forcing yourself to finish it when your heart really isn't in it all the way, is a lesson to be learned in and of itself. Or maybe I'm just making excuses for abandoning another project. Who knows? That's the first 6 months of my game dev journey neatly summarized. It's been a really fun 6 months, and I can't wait to continue learning more and more stuff that I can use for games in the future. If you want to play any of these games, there's a link to my itch.io page in the description. I'll probably make more videos like this in the future when I have more stuff to show off. But until then, have a great day and keep on making games.